All right, by my watch, it's 7 p.m. Central Time here on Wednesday night. Welcome to the Lawyers Emotional Intelligence Book Club. I'm Dave Scriven-Young, an attorney from Chicago, Illinois, and I'll be your host for this discussion. Thank you so much for coming out to the reboot of this club, and I invite all of you to use that chat box because logistically I'm going to be going live from this Facebook page every Wednesday night at 7 p.m. Central. I plan to go for about at least 30 minutes, but it could go longer based on the discussion and how and where that takes us. But you should plan for this to go no longer than an hour, about a half an hour to an hour, depending on how the discussion goes. But this doesn't really work without your ideas, your comments and questions. I'm on this journey with all of you too, so I look forward to hearing and learning from all of you. So let me start by giving you sort of an introduction, because what we're going to do is it's been a while since I've done this program, so I wanted to give you a little bit of an introduction about me, a little bit of an introduction about emotional intelligence and how it applies to lawyers, and then I wanted to get into a little bit about our book, which is Who Moved My Cheese and Adapting to Change. So let me start by telling you a little bit about me. I'm a litigator who solves commercial, environmental, and construction problems. I typically help businesses that have been sued or damaged in some way. I also represent companies that are being targeted by governmental agencies for enforcement or need to navigate a regulatory scheme. My clients appreciate that I start by asking them what their specific goal is for litigation. Then I collaborate with them to construct solutions to their specific problems that align with their goals. My solutions, I think, are creative and fit within my clients' budgets. And as you can see, from the slide, a little bit about me. Graduated in 2003, so I'm not quite a young lawyer, and I work at Abramson as a civil litigator doing construction law, environmental law, and commercial cases. So I'm not only driven by my clients' needs and goals, but I'm also driven by my fellow colleagues to help my fellow colleagues succeed. So here's my mission. My mission is that I get up in the morning to identify and share historically correct knowledge and resources in an inspiring and entertaining format in order to help others meet and exceed goals and standards in every area of their lives. And I'm driven to help because there are many attorneys who desperately need help. We are increasingly depressed and susceptible to substance abuse and suicide as a whole in our profession. And I know this firsthand because I myself was in a dark place not so long ago, depressed, lonely, without hope. But I'm no longer in that place because I used emotional intelligence skills. And we're facing challenges as a profession that we have never faced before. And I think we can all use those same skills to face the challenges and changes that our profession faces. So over the next 15 minutes or so, I'm going to reintroduce this club by exploring my journey of how I used emotional intelligence skills to change my life, how you can too, how the profession as a whole can use these skills. And I'm going to do this by dividing my talk into 4 parts. First, I'm going to tell you the story of where I was, how I became jobless, was an introvert, didn't have any clients, was on the verge of divorce, and certainly in a rut. Secondly, I'm going to introduce you to the principles of emotional intelligence. What it is, how it can be applied by any attorney looking to build a practice that is sustainable, successful, and profitable. Third, I'm going to tell you the precise steps that I took using emotional intelligence skills to turn my career and life around and to build my practice. And fourth, I'm going to explain what resources are available to you to learn more about emotional intelligence skills. Certainly, this book club is part of that. We're also going to start talking about our book for today, which is Who Moved My Cheese. So where did I come from? So I'm going to share a little bit about my personal journey because I think it'll help you connect a lot of where I'm coming from with where I'm going and where I'm going to be taking all of you on this emotional intelligence journey. So let me start with the first part of my talk, which is the story of where I was, how I became jobless, was an introvert, didn't have any clients, was on the verge of divorce and in a rut. I grew up in the near western suburb of Berwyn, went to Catholic grammar school and high school. We were a lower middle class family. My clients both worked in blue collar jobs. My dad was a machinist, later a Zamboni driver, and my mom worked retail at a local bakery. They were certainly not professionals and did not have any real social connections. Neither of them had more than a high school diploma. My parents were not perfect, but they were hardworking, and we always had food on our table. But as a child, I became increasingly dissatisfied. My parents could never seem to get ahead financially. Our one-floor house had precisely 4 doors, a front door, back door, door to the bathroom, and a door to the back porch, which, as you can tell, without any, bedroom doors, it didn't allow for much privacy in a household of 4 people, which included 2 boys. We also had a rampant mouse problem. It would be common to see mice, scurrying around across the floor at the most surprising and inconvenient times. But the only thing really that I knew for certain is that I was good at school, and I saw that as my way to be successful. And if I could only get good grades, go to college, I could be successful in life. At least that's what I thought. But I really did sorely lack a lot. I didn't really have any social graces, didn't have any emotional development, did not have an ability to develop a large network of friends. I remember when I was in 8th grade and the principal came into our classroom. This was, Catholic grade school, and reprimanded the class for having some wild party at one of the kids' houses. It took me a while to realize what she was talking about. And then later I understood that I was one of the few members of the class that wasn't invited to this rather large and wild party. Well, this pattern continued in undergrad and in law school. I wanted to become a lawyer for a number of reasons. Like most people that go to law school, I wanted to help people. And I thought I was pretty smart and could think of creative solutions to problems that no one really thought of. So selfishly, I presumed that all lawyers made a ton of money and that it would be an easy way to succeed financially. But I didn't know, and law school really didn't give me a clue about how exactly I was going to find clients. And I guess I assumed that there would be enough clients to go around for everyone. And how else could all lawyers be successful? And I think, people who are watching, you can certainly put in any comments that you have in your chats. Love to see your thumbs up and hearts and all that stuff. But definitely would love to see your questions and comments as I go along. But I think it's a pretty common conception that, most lawyers make a ton of money, or at least make enough money to be, be successful at life, if that's how you quantify success. Well, fortunately, I came out of law school, having an offer at a great firm, having completed a summer associate program the summer before. And admittedly, I felt a bit out of place socially at the firm, but I was confident that I could do the work. I left that firm after a year and a half and joined a second large law firm. And this new firm offered me the opportunity to get more hands-on deposition and courtroom experience, just because that firm had a different caseload and a different client base than my first firm did. And as I got older and more experienced as a lawyer, my perspective really hadn't changed much. I knew that being part of a bar association was important, so I joined. But I didn't really fully grasp how important my own personal development, the development of relationships, and the development of clients should have been to my practice. And my new firm didn't really provide me much encouragement in that regard either. The firm often held these associate meetings with the firm's leaders. They would provide, like this great lunch and tell us about new developments at the firm and how well we were doing. We were all seated at this, like immense conference room tables in a rather large conference room. So that's like the sort of conference room that is actually, 4 conference rooms deep, and they took out basically the movable walls. So like all the associates from this big Chicago office in this room. And the managing partner told us, basically, don't worry about bringing new clients. Your job is to work and build time, and there's going to be plenty of time for you to bring in business when you're a partner. Well, that made sense in 2006 when times were good, billings were high, clients were paying. Associates couldn't possibly bring in the type of clients that could afford the billing rates of Big Law, but no one saw what would come next. And of course, the economic collapse came, and like most professions, the legal industry was thrown into chaos. Personally, I was doing okay until the principal defendant in our major toxic tort cases went bankrupt. And our cases, which primarily sought reimbursement from that company of cleanup costs, were over. I survived 2 waves of layoffs that hit our firm. And I vividly remember getting calls that layoffs were happening and a feeling of relief when I knew they passed me by. But then it happened. Literally, I made reservations one night to go on a trip with my wife to Disneyland for the Disney Corporation's first ever fan convention. I don't know if anyone watching is, a big Disney fan. We have this like D23 fan convention. It was the first ever one. It was going to be really cool. And then, all pumped up for this trip. And then the next day, the leader of our department came in to tell me that I was being let go. And that was the worst day of my life. I don't remember the actual words that he said, other than giving me an envelope of information about severance, COBRA, and like. The only thing that I do remember is that he said something about getting a call, seeing if it was okay to let me go. And I was so angry that he didn't stick up for me, that he didn't tell them that I was an integral part of the department, that they needed me. But through the kindness of someone at my first firm, I was able to get a document review project that lasted through the summer until I found a place to land. It was a good firm. It was a good project for me. But I was able to land in a place that also was a good firm with good people, but the pay was basically less than half of what I was making, and that was a big adjustment. Basically, working as many hours or more as I was with my prior firm, but making way less money. We still had student loans, true mortgages, child expenses. We didn't really know how to reduce expenses, but we never really had to. So we didn't, and we racked up tens of thousands of dollars of debt. And those like pretend checks that come in the mail with your credit card bills that you could write to get cash off of your credit cards? I was like hoarding those just in case, because I was basically mentally preparing myself for bankruptcy. The lowest moment came as I drove to meet my wife's child's Taekwondo studio. As I was driving up, saw my wife standing outside the studio crying because the credit card that she had been using to pay for my kids' lessons had been declined. It's a pretty low moment in my life. But it just so happens that the economic collapse was a jolt of a wake-up for our profession. Because even before the Great Recession, we had been going through immense challenges that were even bigger than we realized. And this comes from Professor Susan Dykhoff's book, or actually law review article, Expanding the Lawyer's Toolkit of School Skills and Competencies. So she identified a number of things that sort of problems or issues that coincided with the Great Recession. So at that point in time, it basically to the present, clients began pressuring lawyers to be more affordable, economical, efficient, and accountable. Clients began looking for alternative sources of legal assistance. So like do-it-yourself legal services like LegalZoom, outsourced legal research, limited scope representation. And we certainly had seen a lot of that sort of come up the pike. Like I know when I was at my previous firm, we had like one of our big institutional clients had used outsourced legal research. So we got these like memos that basically, basically dealt with, very common sort of legal issues, but we could not do any independent legal research on those topics. It basically had to be, we had to use the service, we could like update the research, but we couldn't do that independent research. I didn't really understand, really at that time as a younger associate what that meant, but we certainly see a lot more of that on a day-to-day basis. And clients began asking for sustainable legal outcomes that limit the attempt to limit the fees that are incurred. So in other words, they're more worried about, the fees that are incurred more than getting, every penny of the recovery. Okay, so these changes, when combined with law student debt, leads to an above-average incidence of depression, substance abuse, and other psychological distress among lawyers. And I was certainly one of those lawyers. I was definitely in a rut. And all of these changes in the profession also meant that traditional legal skills and smarts are not enough to allow a lawyer to succeed. And unfortunately, those were the only skills that I had. So now I'm going to move into the second part of my talk, where I'm going to introduce you to the principles of emotional intelligence, what it is, how it can be applied by any attorney looking to build a practice that's sustainable, successful, and profitable. So what we're going to talk about today is basically the definition of emotional intelligence, which Psychology Today had an article which I thought gave a very good definition. It's basically the ability to identify and manage one's emotions as well as the emotions of others. So it's looking at two things, your own emotions and others' emotions. And the book, Emotional Intelligence 2.0, which I recommend to everyone, identifies 4 primary emotional intelligence skills. You have your 2 personal competencies, which are self-awareness and self-management, and 2 social competencies, which are social awareness and relationship management. So personal competencies and social competencies. So let's start with the first 2 personal competencies. You have self-awareness, which is defined in the Emotional Intelligence 2.0 book as your ability to accurately perceive your own emotions in the moment and understand your tendencies across situations. And so basically what that means, if you think about it for an attorney, basically an attorney with self-awareness has spent time thinking through her own emotions and has figured out where those emotions come from and why those emotions are there. She understands what motivates and satisfies her and which people and situations push her buttons. Self-awareness allows her to pursue the right opportunities, to put her strengths to work, keep her emotions from holding her back. For example, she knows what stress does to her and does not make it worse by pushing that stress onto other people. She's a good idea of how her actions are perceived by others. So an attorney with self-management skills, which is the second personal competency, puts his momentary needs on hold to pursue larger, more important goals. Someone without self-management skills are continually being jerked around by his emotions. So on the other hand, someone with self-management skills is able to decide how he's going to react. So basically, self-management skills give you a choice. When he's dealing with an opposing counsel who's getting in his face or being rude in deposition, how is he going to react? Well, if he's dealing with a problem client or an uncooperative witness on the stand at trial, how is he going to respond? Again, he has a choice. The attorney with self-management skills gets to decide whether he will be combative, witty, humorous, gracious, intellectual, scary, or simply non-responsive. His response will be dictated not by his own emotions, but by his trial strategy and his client's goals. So I remember, a couple of examples of, dealing with these types of people. I was sent to this status hearing and had to deal with an opposing counsel who essentially thought we were updating the court on the status of settlement. And basically this guy thought that we were pretty much done with settlement. And, I was sent as, some people are, not knowing much about the case, but I knew enough about, what was happening with settlement to report on it. And opposing counsel basically was, very upset. He basically got me in the hallway. He was yelling at me over a settlement that he thought was happening, but it wasn't. And so I really, at that moment, had a choice as to what I was going to do with this person. Another example was, dealing with discovery disputes, which, happen all the time. And, attorneys oftentimes take that a little too far, take it to mean, that it's a personal conflict, rather than, remembering that it is basically a client-driven situation and not an attorney personal situation. But, this guy got so bent out of shape that he was swearing at me on the phone. Again, I had the ability to choose what I was going to do in that situation. And then finally, recent example, having a verbal discussion, verbal fight with my wife. Recently I've gone through a lot of, weight changes, been, doing my diet and that sort of thing. And, the question is, when you get into a discussion, a verbal argument with somebody, what exactly does that mean to you? You have the choice. And so I always have the choice every day as to whether I'm going to, take it to mean that I'm going to go, eat some chocolate, or if I'm going to, continue and stick with my diet, and no matter what happens. So it gives me that choice. That's what emotional intelligence skills do. They give you the choice. So when you combine self-awareness and self-management, you understand when someone is pushing your buttons and what your typical reaction in that situation is. You can stop, look at your reaction options, and choose what is best. So now let's talk about the social competencies. So again, there are two social competencies. One is social awareness, and the other is relationship management. Social awareness is your ability to accurately pick up on emotions in other people and understand what's really going on with them. This often means perceiving what other people are thinking and feeling, even if you don't feel the same way. And relationship management is your ability to use your awareness of your emotions and those of others to manage interactions successfully. So let's talk about what an attorney with social awareness and relationship management skills have, and how that makes them, it really makes them better attorneys. So an attorney with social awareness is a great listener and observer. She's able to pay attention to what is happening around her because she's able to stop, or at least disregard, her own inner monologue. Stop anticipating the point that the other person is about to make, and stop thinking ahead to what we are going to say next. And that happens, I think, all the time. When you get into discussion with people, or, when you're in court, or, you're taking a deposition, you have this sort of internal monologue going on where you're trying to figure out what you're going to say next, and you're not really listening to the person that you're talking to or you're deposing. You're not listening to the answer. But an attorney with great social awareness skills has practiced watching people as she interacts with them to get a good sense of how other people are thinking and feeling. She can spot, understand, and acknowledge the emotions of others while she is in the middle of a conversation with them. and she is not oblivious of others' reactions to her. Relationship management skills allow you to build a bond with others over time. So an attorney with relationship management skills see the benefit of connecting with many different people, even those that he is not fond of. He understands that to build a solid relationship, he must grow and cherish that relationship. He knows that a solid relationship is a result of how he understands people, how he treats them, and the history he shares with people. He also knows that it's easier to get his point across. It's easier to get someone to listen if he has built a strong relationship with that person. So I think it's, key. We think of these sort of skills as, quote unquote soft skills, like somehow they're less important than the quote unquote hard skills of sort of developing your legal acumen, developing, knowing what the law is and how to write and that sort of thing. But part of emotional intelligence skills is learning how to communicate, how to get someone's attention, how to build a stronger relationship with a person, even if you don't like them, and to be able to get your point across and persuade them. And that's a really, probably the most important thing that we do as attorneys is our ability to communicate and to persuade. So when these skills are combined, an attorney can build a strong relationship even with the most difficult client, referral source, or strategic partner, right? This can be done with empathy through frequent follow-up, with the intent of providing value to the other person first, without expecting anything in return. And this is how a book of business gets built, through strong, long-lasting relationships. So, one of the things that I learned over time is, like, for example, I'm very involved in the American Bar Association. And, one of the things that I've, when I first started, as I said, I didn't really have, a lot of strong relationship management or social awareness skills. And so, when I got into leadership, I didn't really know how to deal with the people in the senior leadership team. Funny thing about the ABA, especially sort of the Young Lawyers Division, which is where I came up through, they do a lot of hugging. And what's funny about that is, you come from a place where, you don't really do a lot of hugging. You don't really understand that, friends can hug and that sort of thing. And so I didn't know that. And so it was funny. And I think, I think back on it and, I take my kids to a lot of these functions. And, my older son is a big hugger. And I think that may be why is that he learned and saw a lot of what happened, at these ABA events. And so, he got that. But so what I learned over time is that, you don't go to these meetings, these networking meetings, the primary reason is not to get work done. In that, there's like membership goals, and there's really important like policy work that the ABA does. You're providing like newsletter content and things like that. But the most important thing when you go to these meetings is that you're developing the relationships with the people that are there. So you're trying to develop relationships rather than just getting that business done. And so that's something that I learned and developed over time, and that was through sort of the development of emotional intelligence skills. And so not only can you, build these relationships and build business, and as I said, those skills really help me to be persuasive with really any opposing counsel and with any judge, which again is, really obviously very important. So one thing that I wanted to talk about today is sort of the contrast between lawyers with emotional intelligence and problem lawyers who often lack emotional intelligence skills. And I think people wonder sort of all the time, why there are a lot of sort of, quote unquote problem lawyers, people who, have a hard time or not a hard time, but they seem like they go out of their way to be mean people. Well, there was an article in the ABA's Law Practice Today that talks about the whether you have emotional intelligence skills can lead to or can follow whether or not you're going to be able to, you know, be that problem lawyer. So what they say is that how you perceive stress, challenge, and adversity directly influences how you will respond to any stress trigger. So when lawyers perceive their resources to be lacking under stress, they may view stress as a threat. So in fact, having a rigid, inflexible response to stress, change, and adversity can lead to the following. So these are the things. So these are people that don't have emotional intelligence skills because they view stress as a threat. They don't really have the ability to manage that stress, to deal with that stress. They have change and adversity that attack pretty much any lawyer on a daily basis. And without skills, you're going to have some problems. These are the problems that Law Practice Today, that article discusses. So it could lead to increased errors and missing information and deadlines. So, you know, and it's funny because, you know, you see reports of lawyers who, you know, miss statutes of limitation. They miss other critical court deadlines, and then they come to court and they're often, you know, irritated by someone who is trying to, you know, have them stick to a statute of limitations, right? Often these people also have a protect my turf mentality, meaning that they're very protective of their clients, of their turf. Maybe it's their practice group or what have you. They have diminished collaboration and cooperation. They have it leads to more stress. So stress begets stress. They have a poor work quality. They also have a reduced collegiality and even an increase in incivility. And they have survival-based emotions and reactions like impatience, defensive-ness, hypercriticality. So does that sound like anyone you have come across? And I would love to see in comments if you've dealt with these people. I had a case, that recently got resolved a couple of years ago, where we had a lawyer who simply, and this was the increased errors, missing information, and deadlines. This guy missed many deadlines. Actually, partial summary judgment was entered against his client, who was the plaintiff, on my client's counterclaims because he failed to respond to the motion. I don't know the particular, problems that he was having, but that is just like one, that was kind of like the straw that broke the camel's back. He, missed many deadlines. He missed discovery deadlines, and was always asking for more time. In the summary judgment instance, he never even asked for more time. He just didn't respond at all, and that hurt his client. So it certainly is an issue with many lawyers, and it's the lack of emotional intelligence skills is what leads to the problems that many lawyers have. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to move to the third part of my talk, which is I'm going to tell you the steps that I took using emotional intelligence skills to turn my life and career around and to build my practice. It's very important for me to state that what I'm not saying, okay, I'm not saying that emotional intelligence skills are a replacement for anything. This is not a replacement for necessary psychological or medical treatment. If you're having suicidal thoughts, or you're having a medical problem or substance abuse problem, certainly consult a doctor or other medical professional. I am a lawyer, not a doctor. So it's very important for you to get the treatment that you need. So let's talk a little bit about how I use emotional intelligence to change my life. So I really recommend, as I said, the Emotional Intelligence 2.0 book. which is written by Travis Bradbury and Gene Greaves. It basically gives a short introduction on what emotional intelligence is, and then basically provides you a roadmap to go through the strategies of emotional intelligence skills. And so what the book does very well is it gives you this test to find out where your emotional skills are weakest and where you should start. And so, my weakest area, as I determined through this test, was self-management. And it, certainly, what I've talked about during this video, I think, who's surprised that my weakest parts were resisting change, letting stress get the better of me, and brushing people off when something is bothering me. Those three things, I think, probably, a lot of lawyers have problems with that, especially number two, letting stress get the better of me, I think happens to a lot of people. Resisting change, I think it's just a general, problem. As lawyers, we don't really like when things change. We don't like when the law changes. We don't like, when the Supreme Court changes. We don't like when new technology gets put into place or even comes about. I mean, certainly there are lawyers that don't resist change and embrace change, and that's where we're going to be going later in this book club discussion. But certainly, resisting change is a big problem with lawyers and with me. And so what we're going to start off by talking about in this book club is how did I change my resistance to change? So as I said, the Emotional Intelligence 2.0 book gave me a suggestion, which is accept that change is just around the corner. So which is, I don't know, it's kind of a trite, thought, accept that change is right around the corner. How do you do that? So it actually gave me some very specific steps to take. The first step is to admit to yourself that even the most stable, trusted facets of your life are not completely under your control. That is definitely true. No matter what you do, not everything is within your control. When you allow yourself to anticipate change and understand your options if changes occur, you prevent yourself from getting bogged down by strong emotions like shock, surprise, fear, and disappointment when changes actually happen. While you're still likely to experience these negative emotions, your acceptance that change is an inevitable part of life enables you to focus and think rationally, which is critical to making the most out of an unlikely, unwanted, or otherwise unforeseen situation. So I think what I took is I kind of melded these three thoughts together. One is, you can't control everything in your life. Number two, however, you do need to take some responsibility and accountability to prepare. And I take that sort of into two prongs. First of all, you take responsibility and accountability to try to prevent it from happening. So you want to look at your life and think, what are the things that could happen, and how do I prevent it from happening? What are the things that I can do, that I can control? Because it may be that the economy is crashing around me. It may be that my firm, is in trouble. It's not, it's not, just for the record, but, in case it is. I'm thinking back, in 2009, it could be that those things, are occurring. But there are certain things that I can do to prevent me from being swept along with that tide, swept along with the ship. And it's not a matter of, thinking, I'm not going to participate in this recession. You are participating. You're participating in the economy in every way. But what are you going to do to prevent yourself from being swept away? And then also, what are you doing to prepare yourself for the eventuality that's going to occur. So in case you were able to, in case you were not unable to prevent that sweep from occurring, from being swept up in that, what are you going to do to prepare yourself on the other side? So what the book basically told me is, you have to implement the strategy by fully by setting aside a small amount of time to create a list of important changes that you think could possibly happen. And it's just thinking about it, you could think of like the doomsday scenarios, right? Nuclear war, war in the shores, zombie apocalypse. Those are kind of more fantastical, but you want to think about sort of the small changes as well. Thinking about like, a few years ago, my basement leaked, and so we had this whole bunch of water in our basement, and it happened because our sump pump died because we didn't have power and we didn't have a generator. And so one of the things I've been thinking about recently is, well, we could have prevented it, and we still can prevent the occurrence from happening again by getting a generator. We also want, you want to make sure you have things like insurance paid up and that sort of thing. Because if, in case your generator burns out, what are you going to do? Well, you have insurance to, as a backstop. So you write out all possible actions that you will take should the change occur, and write down ideas for things that you can do now to prepare for that change. So what did I do? I basically prepared myself for a layoff. We prepared ourselves financially, and I mean my family. We paid off debt. We saved an emergency fund. And we did that through, many people know, like Dave Ramsey. And, we basically used this program to save the baby emergency fund, pay off all of our debt except for our home mortgage, and then save a real emergency fund. And we've kept that in place for many, many, many years. Then we made sure that we're not dependent on the primary legal job in order to eat. So, the biggest problem that we were having at the time is that we did have a little bit of savings in sort of a retirement insurance account, which is, terrible idea in general. But we also had a little bit of college savings as well. But essentially, we were not saving near enough as we should, and we were basically dependent on that job in order to eat. So I got a second job. I started roughing hockey on the side. We made the decision as a family to have my wife go back to school and to work. And I recently started taking classes online to develop, to develop an online business. So a lot of things that I've been doing to prepare myself in case another layoff occurs. And then I did, I'm doing everything that I can to prevent it from happening. So even though I'm with a great firm, I really like the people that I'm working with, and we have great clients, I've started recently really ramping up things to prevent another layoff. So I'm going over and above my billable hour requirement by doing the work that is in front of me and building a cushion of billable hours. So, a lot of times, when I started working as a lawyer, I sort of understood, well, okay, you have I was at a big firm, so we had a 2,000-hour billable hour requirement. What I didn't, fully understand is that when you work as a lawyer, it's not just a constant flow of work. There are times where, instead, I found later on that, there are, times that the work is very, very busy. And then times that there's, basically nothing, or there could be times, but there is nothing. And so what I've recently started doing is realizing, well, I have to do the work that's in front of me and do a lot of it and build that cushion of hours. So when I get to the leaner times, I won't have to worry as much because I've already built up, that cushion. I didn't really understand that when I first started practicing. I think some people did, but I certainly didn't. I've also just started developing a book of business. I've wrapped up networking. I started a blog, environmental blog, a podcast, and this vlog. I've started getting more involved in bar association work. I've started reading books and attending conferences about sales, marketing, and leadership. I've also, I'm taking, what a famous, Navy SEAL podcaster says, I'm taking extreme ownership, meaning that, if there are problems that are happening, I'm taking responsibility for that. I'm not waiting for someone else to do it. I'm doing it myself. And so it's extremely important thing in my life that I'm doing. And I'm setting 10x goals in every facet of my life. 10x goals are essentially these, monster, unreasonable goals. And the thought is, and this comes from Grant Cardone, is that, if you set a reasonable goal and you don't hit it, then you're left with a very poor result. But if you set a very unreasonable goal and you don't hit it, more than likely you're going to hit that reasonable goal. So you're going to be in the range of reasonable to unreasonable. In other words, you're going to be very happy with the result, even if you don't hit that 10x very unreasonable goal. And so I've started setting those goals in every facet of my life. So things like income and billable hours and my weight and my travel schedule and my spiritual relationship and all of that sort of thing. And so I'm setting these unreasonable goals so I can prepare myself, prevent something bad from happening, but also preparing myself in case something does happen. And part of that preparation is getting more interested and developing my emotional intelligence skills, because one of those skills is resilience, right? Being able to get through the storm and come out on the other side with your head held high. That's resilience. That's part of emotional intelligence and what we're going to be talking about in this book club. So in one other, just to put a pin on it, on that point, when I said that I was angry that, going back to my layoff story, when I said that my partner, didn't say that I was angry that my partner didn't say that it wasn't okay to fire me. Okay. So I was very upset about that. How can you possibly say that it was okay? I had 2 kids. I was married. He knew, where I live. I mean, it's not like it's, Lake Forest, but it's, good area. But I was really wrong to be angry. It was okay because I hadn't built up a book of business. I hadn't been going above and beyond my hours at work. I basically was sitting there waiting for people to give me stuff to do. And so I had not been practicing extreme ownership. And so what we're going to be doing in this series is to learn the skills that we need to prepare for change and to prevent things from happening to us that we don't want them to happen, but then also have resilience. So when it does happen, we're going to come out on the other side with our head held high. So what other emotional intelligence skills can we learn? And obviously, with adapting to change, we're going to start into the Who Moved My Cheese book. But I just wanted to say that there are 65 other strategies in the Emotional Intelligence 2.0 book that will help develop emotional intelligence skills. And at this moment, 48 minutes into this broadcast, we've just reached the tip of the iceberg. And so, Now I want to move into sort of explaining what resources are available to you to learn more about emotional intelligence and how to implement those skills in your career. So far and away, the best resource that I've seen is the Emotional Intelligence 2.0 book. So I really recommend that all of you take the test, see where you are the weakest, and implement the strategies suggested in the book. Certainly, this book club is going to be a good resource for you because I'm going to continue to go through starting with adapting to change, that skill specifically. And we're going to continue on with the other strategies. And I'm going to be learning along with all of you on this journey. And then I also have a daily podcast looking at marketing, sales, and leadership for attorneys. It's called the Lawyer Lifestyle Podcast. It's a daily podcast, meaning every day at approximately 3 o'clock, I record an episode and get it published. I go through, again, because I'm sort of on this journey with you, I'm going through some of the greats in the marketing, sales, and leadership books. So right now I'm doing Grant Cardone's If You're Not First, You're Last, which basically talks about how you can keep your pipeline full of potential clients, the things that you can do in terms of scripts, making phone calls, personal visits, and the like, and how to make sure that you're never without that someone in your pipeline, actually a very full pipeline, from which you're going to get your client base. So, now I think I've, reached sort of the end of sort of my personal story. What I would say is, I'm still on the journey. I've used these emotional intelligence skills to change my life, and I think all of you can as well. You're not only sort of your personal life, but I think, as I hope I've made clear, your professional life can have dramatic improvements as well. And so, I'm very thankful thinking about it. Thankful to my mentors, my coworkers and current firm. Thankful to my family by coming on this journey with me. And so, what I think what we're going to do is, since it's 7:51, and I promised that we would only go, about an hour, so that we'll just end here. And what we're going to do is next week start up with Who Moved My Cheese, and to talk about sort of Dr. Johnson's take on, accepting change is just around the corner. It's a really, great book. And I do want to go through that with you in some detail. So I don't know if there's any further discussions or questions. If you do have discussions or questions, please, you can put them in the chat box. Would love to hear from you. In the meantime, if you don't have anything burning at the moment, you can always contact me. I'm at Attorney DSY on all the social platforms, and my phone number and email address are there as well. And what I would tell you to conclude is, ask yourself, in your professional and in your personal life, what changes do you think you need to make in your life? And if I can make changes, so can you. Thank you so much for being with me, and have a great night, everybody.